Bear cub crying. Beside a frozen lake, a father's desperate attempt to help will leave you speechless. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The air bit at Ethan Marshall's face as he trudged through the snow-covered forest. Each breath emerged as a cloud of white vapor, vanishing into the crisp winter morning. His 8-year-old daughter, Lily, followed closely behind, her small boots crunching in the fresh powder. Their weekend trip to his family's old cabin had been Ethan's idea, a chance to disconnect from their busy lives in the city and reconnect with each other after the painful year following his wife's passing. "Dad, are we almost there?" Lily asked, her voice muffled by the thick scarf wrapped around her face. Only her bright blue eyes were visible, a mirror image of her mother's. "Just a little further, sweetheart," Ethan replied, pointing ahead. "The lake should be right through those trees. Your mom and I used to skate there when we were younger." Lily nodded solemnly. She'd become quieter since losing her mother, and Ethan hoped this trip might spark something in her. A moment of joy, perhaps, or simply a break from the heaviness that had settled over their home. As they approached the clearing, the frozen lake revealed itself, a vast expanse of white stretching out before them. The morning sun glinted off the ice, creating a dazzling display that momentarily took Ethan's breath away. The surrounding pines stood sentinel, their branches heavy with snow, creating a picture-perfect winter scene. "It's pretty," Lily whispered, stepping up beside her father. Ethan smiled down at her. "It sure is, Lil, just like I remembered it." They stood in comfortable silence, taking in the pristine landscape. Ethan was about to suggest they walk along the shoreline when an unusual sound caught his attention. A soft, plaintive cry carried on the still air. "Did you hear that?" he asked, frowning. Lily tilted her head, listening. "Is that an animal?" The sound came again, more distinct this time. A whimpering cry that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. It was the unmistakable sound of distress, of pain and fear mingled together. Without thinking, he began moving toward the source, his protective instincts kicking in. "Dad, where are you going?" Lily called, hurrying to keep up. "I just want to check something, honey. Stay close." They followed the shoreline, the cries growing louder with each step. As they rounded a bend where a cluster of evergreens nearly touched the ice, Ethan suddenly stopped short. There, huddled against the trunk of a fallen tree, was a small bear cub. The creature was trembling violently, its dark fur dusted with snow. One of its front paws was held off the ground, and Ethan could see patches of ice clinging to its fur. The poor thing must have ventured onto the frozen lake and fallen through a thin spot, somehow managing to pull itself out before hypothermia set in. "Oh my God," Ethan breathed. "Lily, stay back." The cub looked up at them, its eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. It let out another pitiful cry that seemed to pierce straight through to Ethan's heart. It couldn't have been more than a few months old, not much more than a baby. "Dad, it's hurt," Lily whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "We have to help it." Ethan quickly scanned the surrounding forest, his pulse quickening. Where there was a cub, there was almost certainly a mother bear nearby, and nothing was more dangerous than a mother bear who believed her young was threatened. "We need to be careful, Lil. Its mother could be around." "But Dad, look at it. It's crying." Lily's voice cracked. "It needs help." The cub tried to stand, only to collapse back down, its cries growing more desperate. Ethan saw tears forming in his daughter's eyes, and he felt his resolve wavering. He knew the smart thing would be to back away slowly, to call the park rangers or wildlife services. But as he looked at the struggling cub, something inside him couldn't turn away. "Okay," he said finally, drawing a deep breath. "I'm going to see if I can help. But you need to stay right here, understand? If I tell you to run, you run back to the cabin as fast as you can." Lily nodded solemnly, her eyes never leaving the cub. Ethan began to move forward, each step careful and deliberate. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he approached, speaking in a low, soothing voice. "Hey there, little one. It's okay, I'm not going to hurt you." The cub watched him approach, its dark eyes wary but too weak to flee. As Ethan drew closer, he could see the cub was even smaller than he'd first thought, probably separated from its mother during its first winter. Its coat was matted with ice, and its breathing came in shallow, rapid bursts that clouded the air before its snout. With each step, Ethan cast nervous glances at the tree line. The silence of the forest was unnerving. No birds called, no branches creaked. Just the soft whimpers of the cub and the pounding of his own heart in his ears. "Dad," Lily called softly from behind him. "I think it likes your voice. It stopped crying." She was right. The cub had fallen silent, watching Ethan with a mixture of fear and what almost looked like hope. It was that look, so vulnerable, so trusting despite its fear, that made Ethan's decision final. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the granola bar he'd packed for their hike. Slowly, he unwrapped it, broke off a small piece and held it out. "Here you go," he murmured. "This might help." The cub sniffed the air, hunger momentarily overcoming its fear. It stretched its neck forward, nose twitching. Ethan remained perfectly still, arm extended, barely breathing. And that's when he heard it. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate the very air around them. A sound that turned his blood to ice. Somewhere in the trees, watching them, was the mother bear. Ethan's muscles tensed, every survival instinct screaming at him to run. But he knew better. Running would only trigger the bear's predatory response. His eyes darted frantically through the trees, trying to locate the source of the growl while keeping his body angled between the threat and Lily. "Lily," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Very slowly, back away toward that large pine tree. Don't turn your back, just ease backward." From the corner of his eye, he could see his daughter begin to move, her face pale with fear. The cub let out another whimper, attempting to rise on its injured paw, but collapsing again in the snow. The growl came again, louder and more threatening. Then Ethan saw her. A massive black bear, easily 6 feet tall when standing on her hind legs, emerging from between two snow-laden spruce trees. Her fur was thick and dark against the white landscape, her breath visible in heavy clouds around her snout. Her eyes, small and intelligent, were fixed directly on Ethan. "Oh, God," he breathed. He'd encountered black bears before while hiking, but never a mother protecting her young. This was a completely different scenario, one that could turn deadly in seconds. The mother bear took a lumbering step forward, sending Ethan's heart hammering against his ribs. He couldn't outrun her. No human could. Bears could reach speeds of 35 miles per hour, and in these conditions, with deep snow underfoot, he wouldn't stand a chance. Especially not with Lily to protect. As if sensing his thoughts, Lily whispered, "Dad?" Her voice trembled with terror. "It's okay," he lied, keeping his voice steady with effort. "Just keep backing up." Very slowly. The bear lowered her head, nostrils flaring as she assessed them. Ethan knew she was trying to determine if they were a threat to her cub. One wrong move, one sudden gesture, and she would charge. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the freezing temperature. The granola bar remained clutched in his frozen hand, his arm still half extended toward the cub. Slowly, deliberately, he began to lower it, hoping the mother wouldn't interpret the movement as aggression. The cub whined again, struggling to stand, clearly calling for its mother. The sound seemed to agitate the larger bear, who huffed loudly and took another step forward, her massive paws leaving deep impressions in the snow. Ethan's mind raced, trying to recall everything he'd ever learned about bear encounters. Make yourself look big. Speak in a calm, firm voice. Back away slowly. Don't make direct eye contact. But all those rules seemed woefully inadequate in the face of the massive creature before him. "Hey there, Mama Bear," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "We don't mean any harm. Your little one needs help, that's all. We're going to leave you both alone now." The bear tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. For a brief, hopeful moment, Ethan thought they might be able to defuse the situation. Then the ice beneath his feet gave a soft, almost musical crack. He looked down in horror. In his focus on the bear, he hadn't realized how close to the lake's edge he'd stepped. The ice beneath him was thinner here, weakened by the shoreline current. Another small crack appeared, a spiderweb of fractures spreading outward from beneath his boot. "Dad!" Lily cried out, forgetting to keep her voice down in her panic. The sharp sound startled the mother bear. She reared up on her hind legs, a terrifying display of power and size that made Ethan's blood run cold. Her growl transformed into a roar that echoed across the frozen lake. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Ethan saw his daughter's terrified face. He saw the helpless cub, still struggling to rise. He saw the mother bear beginning to drop to all fours, the prelude to a charge. And he felt the ice beneath him groaning, ready to give way. A split-second decision. There was only one way to divert the bear's attention from Lily. "Run to the cabin!" he shouted to his daughter. Then, before he could reconsider, Ethan Marshall did the unthinkable. He turned and ran, not away from the bear, but directly onto the frozen lake. The ice cracked loudly beneath his pounding footsteps, but held. Behind him, he heard the mother bear's roar and the sound of pursuit, exactly what he'd hoped for. She was following him, drawn away from Lily and her own cub by the movement and noise. Ethan's lungs burned with each gasping breath of frigid air. His boots slipped on the slick surface as he ran, arms pumping, heart thundering. He didn't dare look back, but he could hear the bear's heavy breathing and the crash of her weight on the ice. She was gaining on him, 50 yards from shore now, the center of the lake, where the ice would be thickest. If he could just make it there, maybe he could... The world dropped out from beneath him. One moment he was running, the next he was plunging into darkness, the shock of the freezing water stealing the breath from his lungs. The cold hit him like a physical blow, thousands of needles piercing his skin simultaneously. His heavy winter clothes, moments ago a shield against the chill air, now dragged him downward. Disoriented, Ethan kicked and thrashed, fighting to find the surface. His hands struck solid ice. He'd come up directly beneath the frozen crust. Panic surged through him as he scrabbled desperately against the slippery surface, searching for the hole he'd fallen through. His lungs screamed for air. Spots danced before his eyes. In the murky blue-black water, he could see the pale light of the opening several feet away. With the last of his strength, he pushed toward it, arms outstretched. Ethan's head broke the surface, and he gasped raggedly, drawing precious oxygen into his starving lungs. His fingers clawed at the edge of the ice, but it kept breaking away in chunks, unable to support his weight. Each attempt to pull himself up ended with him slipping back into the numbing water. The cold was paralyzing now, his movements becoming sluggish and uncoordinated. Hypothermia was setting in rapidly. He couldn't feel his feet or hands anymore, and the violent shivering that had gripped him seconds ago was beginning to subside, a dangerous sign. "Help!" he tried to shout, but his voice emerged as little more than a hoarse rasp. "Lily! Anyone!" The shore seemed impossibly distant. Through blurring vision, Ethan could no longer see the bear or her cub. Had she fallen through too? Had Lily made it safely back to the cabin? His thoughts were becoming disjointed, fragmented by the cold. He had perhaps minutes before his muscles would stop responding altogether. Another desperate attempt to haul himself onto the ice failed, his numb fingers unable to grip properly. The weight of his waterlogged clothes pulled him down, and it was becoming harder to keep his face above water. "I'm sorry, Lily," he whispered, his strength failing. After everything they'd been through, after promising her he would always be there, he was going to leave her alone in the world. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd survived combat deployments in the military, had lived through the devastating loss of his wife to cancer, only to die in a frozen lake because he couldn't leave an injured animal to suffer. As his vision began to dim around the edges, Ethan thought he heard a voice. Distant at first, then growing clearer. Someone was calling his name. "Ethan, grab this!" Through the haze of encroaching unconsciousness, he saw something sliding across the ice toward him. A long, wooden branch, thick enough to support weight. Behind it, a figure was crawling carefully toward him, staying low to distribute their weight across the ice. "Ethan, take the branch!" With a monumental effort, he forced his unresponsive arms to move, reaching for the lifeline. His numb fingers closed around the rough bark, and he held on with what little strength remained. The branch began to move, pulling him slowly toward more solid ice. Ethan tried to kick his legs to help, but they were leaden weights now, unresponsive to his commands. He could only cling to the branch as he was dragged inch by painful inch across the ice. After what seemed like an eternity, strong hands grabbed his coat, hauling him completely free of the water. He collapsed onto the ice, coughing and shaking violently, too weak to even lift his head. "Jesus Christ, Ethan, what were you thinking?" The voice was familiar. Connor Adams, his neighbor from 2 cabins over. A retired park ranger who spent winters up here. Ethan had never been so glad to hear anyone's voice in his life. "Lily," he managed to stammer through chattering teeth. My daughter." "She's the one who found me," Connor said, quickly removing Ethan's soaked outer coat. "She came running up to my cabin screaming about you and a bear. Now we need to get you warm before you freeze to death out here." With surprising strength for a man in his 60s, Connor helped Ethan to his feet. His legs barely supported him, and every movement was agony as circulation began to return to his extremities. "The key cub," Ethan gasped. "There was a bear key cub, injured." "Forget about the damn bears," Connor growled, half carrying, half dragging him toward the shore. "Let nature take its course. That's what my 30 years as a ranger taught me." But as they neared the bank, a dark shape moved into their path. Connor froze, his grip on Ethan tightening. The mother bear stood before them, her massive form blocking their way to safety. She was on all fours now, her head lowered, but she made no move to charge. Behind her, barely visible, was the small form of her cub, still huddled where Ethan had left it. "Don't move," Connor whispered. "Not a muscle." Ethan's mind cleared slightly, adrenaline cutting through the fog of hypothermia. They were trapped on the ice with open water behind them and an apex predator in front. His body was shutting down from the cold, and Connor wouldn't be able to outrun the bear while supporting him. The standoff stretched for what felt like minutes, though it could only have been seconds. The bear huffed, her breath steaming in the cold air. She took a step forward, then another, her eyes never leaving them. Then, to Ethan's astonishment, she stopped directly in front of them. For a long, surreal moment, the massive bear simply stared at him, her dark eyes seemingly full of intelligence and something else, something Ethan would have sworn was recognition. Slowly, deliberately, she turned away, moving back to her cub. With surprising gentleness, she nudged the small form with her snout. The cub responded, struggling to its feet, clearly still favoring its injured paw but able to move. Together, mother and child began to lumber away from the lake, disappearing into the trees without a backward glance. "I'll be damned," Connor breathed. "In all my years out here." Ethan could only stare in disbelief, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. Had the bear recognized that he'd been trying to help her cub? Had she deliberately chosen not to attack? Or was it simply that her focus had returned to her injured offspring once the perceived threat had been removed? He would never know for certain. But in that moment, frozen and exhausted as he was, Ethan felt a profound connection to the wild creature. A mother. Like him, a parent doing whatever was necessary to protect their child. "Let's get you inside before you turn into an icicle," Connor said, breaking the spell of the moment. They made their way slowly off the ice and through the snow-covered forest, every step an effort for Ethan's failing body. By the time Connor's cabin came into view, a small plume of smoke rising from its chimney, Ethan could barely keep his eyes open. The cabin door burst open, and Lily came running out, her face streaked with tears. "Dad!" she cried, rushing toward him. She stopped short when she saw his condition, her eyes widening with fear. "Is he okay?" "He will be," Connor assured her, guiding Ethan up the steps and into the blessed warmth of the cabin. "Your father's too stubborn to let a little ice water finish him off." Inside, the heat from a roaring fire seemed to burn Ethan's frozen skin. Connor eased him into a chair near the hearth, wrapping him in thick blankets while Lily hovered anxiously nearby. "You need to get those wet clothes off," Connor said, already moving to put a kettle on the wood stove. "I've got some dry things that should fit you well enough." As Connor busied himself preparing hot drinks and finding dry clothing, Lily approached her father cautiously. "Dad?" she whispered. "I was so scared." Despite his exhaustion and the pain of returning circulation, Ethan managed to lift his arm, inviting her closer. She came immediately, burying her face against his blanket-wrapped shoulder. "I thought," her voice broke, "I thought you were going to die like Mom." The raw fear in her voice cut through Ethan more sharply than the cold ever could. He tightened his arm around her, pressing his cheek against the top of her head. "I'm still here, Lil," he murmured. "I promised I wouldn't leave you, remember?" She nodded against his shoulder, sniffling. "The bears," she said after a moment. Are they okay?" Despite everything, Ethan found himself smiling. Even now, her concern was for the animals that had nearly cost him his life. "They're fine," he assured her. "The mother came back for her cub. They left together." Lily pulled back slightly, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Really? The baby wasn't too hurt?" "It had a bad paw, but it could walk. I think they'll be okay." "Like us?" she asked, her voice small but hopeful. Ethan felt something shift inside him, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire or blankets. For the first time since losing his wife, since watching Lily retreat into herself with grief, he saw a spark of the little girl she'd been before. Caring, empathetic, open-hearted. "Yeah, Lil," he said softly. just like us. Connor returned with steaming mugs of hot chocolate, setting them on the small table beside Ethan's chair. "Drink this," he instructed. "Then you're getting into dry clothes and straight to bed. Hypothermia's nothing to mess around with." Ethan nodded gratefully, but his attention remained on Lily. She'd picked up her mug and was blowing carefully across the surface, creating ripples in the dark liquid. There was color in her cheeks again, and a certain lightness to her movements that had been absent for far too long. "Connor," Ethan said suddenly, "do you still have those wildlife books? The ones with the pictures of local animals?" Connor raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Sure, whole shelf of them in the guest room." "Could Lily look at them while I change? Maybe you could tell her about some of the animals you've seen out here over the years." Connor's weathered face softened with understanding. "Course I can. I got 30 years of ranger stories that had put her right to sleep." Lily looked up, her interest clearly piqued. "Did you ever see bear cubs before?" "Cubs, wolf pups, fox kits, you name it. I've probably crossed paths with it at some point," Connor said, beginning to lead her toward the bookshelves. "There was this one time I found a moose calf that had gotten itself stuck in a boggy patch." As their voices faded into the next room, Ethan leaned back in the chair, letting the fire's warmth seep into his bones. His body ached, his extremities burning with pins and needles as circulation returned, but he hardly noticed the discomfort. For the first time in a long while, he felt something like peace. They'd come to this place seeking some kind of connection, a way to begin healing the wounds left by their loss. They'd nearly found tragedy instead. But somehow, through the fear and danger, through ice water and bear encounters, they'd stumbled upon exactly what they'd been looking for. A beginning, a way forward, together. He lifted the mug of hot chocolate to his lips, the sweet warmth spreading through him. Outside the window, snowflakes had begun to fall, adding a fresh layer to the already white landscape. Somewhere out there, a mother bear and her cub were making their way to shelter, survivors like himself and Lily. Perhaps there was a lesson in that, Ethan thought, that even in our most vulnerable moments, when we feel most broken, we find a way to keep going. For our children, for ourselves, one step at a time through the snow, even on injured paws. The storm outside intensified, wind howling around the eaves of the cabin, but inside all was warm and still. Ethan closed his eyes, listening to the soft murmur of voices from the next room, his daughter, animated and curious again, and Connor's patient responses. They would stay here tonight, safe in this harbor from the storm. Tomorrow they would return to their own cabin, and eventually to their lives in the city. But something fundamental had changed. A frozen lake and a bear cub had somehow thawed something inside both of them, something that had been locked in ice since the day they'd said goodbye to Ethan's wife, to Lily's mother. It wasn't a cure for grief. Ethan knew better than to think such a thing existed, but it was a reminder that life continued, that connection was still possible, that beauty and danger and wonder still existed in the world around them, and for now, that was enough. As Ethan drifted toward sleep, the events of the day replaying in his mind, one image remained clearest of all. The mother bear, standing before him on the ice, choosing to walk away rather than attack. There had been something in that moment, something profound and inexplicable, a recognition between two parents that transcended species and language. In that look, that moment of connection, there had been something that left Ethan truly speechless. The next morning dawned clear and brilliant, the storm having passed during the night, leaving the world outside transformed into a glistening wonderland. Sunlight danced across untouched snow, creating diamond-like sparkles wherever it touched. Ethan awoke slowly, his body stiff and sore from his ordeal, but his mind clearer than it had been in months. He found himself on Connor's fold-out couch, buried under several layers of blankets. In the kitchen, he could hear quiet conversation and the clatter of dishes, Lily's high, clear voice, and Connor's deeper rumble. He sat up carefully, wincing at the protest from his muscles. The events of the previous day came flooding back, the bear cub, the ice, the freezing water. By all rights, he should be dead. Instead, he was here, warm and alive, listening to his daughter laugh for what felt like the first time in forever. Wrapping one of the blankets around his shoulders, Ethan made his way to the kitchen. Connor stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with the easy confidence of a man who'd cooked for himself for decades. Lily sat at the small wooden table, a wildlife book open in front of her, her finger tracing something on the page. "Morning," Ethan said, his voice still rough from yesterday's shouting and the cold water. Lily's head snapped up, her face breaking into a smile that hit Ethan like a physical force. When was the last time she'd looked at him like that? "Dad, Mr. Adams is making pancakes with real maple syrup, and he showed me pictures of bear cubs in his books. Did you know they stay with their moms for almost 2 years? And they can climb trees when they're really little?" The stream of information, delivered with genuine enthusiasm, was so reminiscent of the Lily from before, the curious, chatty child who had been buried beneath grief for so long, that Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Is that right?" he managed, coming to sit beside her. "Sounds like you've been doing some research." Connor turned from the stove, spatula in hand. "Your girl's got a real interest in wildlife, been peppering me with questions since sunrise." Despite his gruff tone, there was a warmth in the old ranger's eyes. "How are you feeling this morning? Any numbness in your extremities? Confusion? Muscle pain?" "Just sore," Ethan assured him. "Thanks to you, I think I escaped the worst of it." Connor grunted, turning back to his pancakes. "Thank your daughter. If she hadn't found me when she did, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Ethan looked at Lily with pride. "You were very brave yesterday." She ducked her head, suddenly shy. "I was really scared, but I remembered what you always say about being scared. That it's okay to be afraid, as long as you don't let it stop you from doing what needs to be done," Ethan finished, recalling the many times he'd told her this during her mother's illness and after her death. Lily nodded. "So I ran really fast to get help." "You sure did," Connor confirmed, bringing a platter of steaming pancakes to the table. "Came tearing up to my door like a little tornado." They ate breakfast together, Lily continuing to share facts about bears and other wildlife she'd learned from Connor's books. Ethan listened, savoring her animation, the light that had returned to her eyes. It was as if the ice around her heart had cracked open, just as the lake had beneath his feet. "You know," Connor said, refilling his coffee mug, "there's something strange about that bear encounter yesterday." His weathered face took on a thoughtful expression. "Black bears around here usually hibernate through winter, especially mothers with cubs." Ethan paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "You're right, I didn't even think about that. Mom bears generally don't bring their cubs out until spring," Connor continued, sitting back down at the table. "And they sure as hell don't let them near frozen lakes in January." Lily looked up from her pancakes, her expression serious. "So, why were they there, Mr. Adams?" Connor shrugged. "Could be a lot of reasons. Food scarcity might have woken them early. Or maybe something disturbed their den." He took a sip of his coffee. "There's been some unusual activity in these woods lately." "What kind of activity?" Ethan asked, suddenly alert. Connor seemed to hesitate, glancing at Lily before answering. Probably nothing to worry about. Just some folks who don't respect nature the way they should. The conversation shifted to other topics, but Connor's words lingered in Ethan's mind. After breakfast, while Lily helped clear the dishes, he pulled the older man aside. "What didn't you want to say in front of Lily?" he asked quietly. Connor's expression darkened. "There've been poachers in the area. Last month I found traps set not far from here, illegal ones, and reports of gunshots at night. Poachers? For bears? Bears, wolves, anything they can sell. Bear gallbladders fetch a high price in certain markets." Connor's voice was tight with controlled anger. "I've been working with the local wildlife authorities, but they're understaffed, especially in winter." Ethan felt a surge of anger. "You think they might have been after that mother and cub?" "It's possible. Or maybe they disturbed their den, forced them to relocate." Connor sighed. "Bears with cubs are vulnerable this time of year. They're supposed to be conserving energy, not wandering around in the snow." Before Ethan could respond, Lily appeared in the doorway, Connor's largest wildlife book clutched to her chest. "Dad, can we go check on the bears? I want to make sure the cub is okay." Both men exchanged glances. "Honey, that's not a good idea," Ethan said gently. "Wild animals need their space, especially after what happened yesterday." Disappointment clouded her features. "But what if the cub is still hurt? What if they need help?" Connor knelt down to her level. "The best way to help wild animals is usually to leave them alone," he explained. "The mother knows how to take care of her baby better than we do." Lily seemed unconvinced. "But you said bears aren't supposed to be out in winter, so something's wrong, right?" Ethan marveled at his daughter's perception and persistence, traits that reminded him painfully of her mother. "Tell you what," Connor said after a thoughtful pause. "I need to check some trail cameras I set up to monitor wildlife movements. If, and that's a big if, we happen to spot the bears from a safe distance, we can observe them. But no approaching, no interfering. Deal?" Lily's face brightened. "Deal!" Ethan raised an eyebrow at Connor. "Trail cameras. For the poachers?" Connor nodded slightly. "Among other things. I may be retired, but old habits die hard." An hour later, they were trudging through the fresh snow, following a path that Connor assured them would keep them well away from likely bear territory. The forest was hushed and beautiful, snow weighing down branches and transforming the landscape into something from a fairy tale. "Your clothes should be dry enough by this evening," Connor told Ethan as they walked. "You're welcome to stay another night, though. Storm's passed, but it's supposed to get down to negative temperatures tonight." "Thanks for the offer," Ethan replied, keeping a close eye on Lily, who was a few steps ahead, examining animal tracks in the snow. "But I think we should head back to our cabin, get back to some normalcy." Connor nodded. "Understandable. Just be careful. That was a close call yesterday." He paused, then added, "You know, I've been thinking about what happened on the ice, the way that mother bear just looked at you, then turned away." "I've been thinking about that too," Ethan admitted. "It was almost like she recognized me somehow. In 30 years as a ranger, I've never seen anything quite like it," Connor said, his breath clouding around his words. "Bears are usually predictable. They follow their instincts. A mother with a cub cornered like that? She should have charged. So, why didn't she?" Connor shook his head. "I wish I knew. Animals can surprise you sometimes. They're not as different from us as people think." Ahead of them, Lily suddenly stopped. "Look," she whispered excitedly, pointing to a set of tracks in the snow, large, rounded impressions with 5 toe marks visible in some of the clearer prints. "Bear tracks," Connor confirmed, examining them. "Good eye, Lily. These are fresh too, probably from last night or early this morning." "Are they from our bears?" Lily asked, her eyes wide. "Could be," Connor replied. "They're heading deeper into the forest, away from human areas. That's a good sign." They followed the trail for another 15 minutes, Connor occasionally stopping to check his map or consult a compass. Finally, they reached a large pine tree with a small metal box attached to its trunk about 7 feet up. "Here we are," Connor said, pulling a small stepladder from his backpack. "One of my camera stations." As Connor climbed up to retrieve the memory card from the trail camera, Ethan took the opportunity to talk to Lily. Kneeling beside her, he asked, "How are you doing, Lil? Yesterday was pretty scary." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I was really scared when you fell in the water," she admitted. "But you know what's weird, Dad? What's that? I didn't feel like when Mom died." She struggled to find the words, her young mind grappling with complex emotions. "When Mom died, it felt like everything just stopped, like I couldn't breathe anymore, but yesterday, even though I was super scared, I could still do things. I could still run and get help." Ethan felt his heart constrict. He'd been so wrapped up in his own grief, he hadn't fully comprehended how his daughter had been experiencing hers. "That's not weird at all, Lil," he said softly. "That's brave, really brave." She scuffed her boot in the snow. "I think Mom would have been proud of us yesterday. She always said we should help animals." "She would have been," Ethan agreed, his throat tight. "Your mom loved all creatures just like you do." "Got it," Connor called down, waving the memory card as he descended the ladder. "Let's head back. I can check this on my laptop, see if our friends made an appearance." They retraced their steps through the winter forest. Lily now walking between the two men, occasionally reaching up to hold her father's hand, something she hadn't done voluntarily in months. The simple gesture affected Ethan more profoundly than he could express. When they arrived back at Connor's cabin, the older man immediately set up his laptop on the kitchen table. "Let's see what we've got," he muttered, inserting the memory card. Ethan and Lily crowded around, watching as he opened the files. The first few videos showed nothing unusual. A fox trotting past, a deer cautiously approaching, then startling at some unseen movement. Then Connor clicked on a file time-stamped from 3 nights ago. The night vision footage was grainy but clear enough to show 2 figures moving through the forest. They wore camouflage clothing and carried rifles with mounted scopes. "Poachers," Connor growled. "Just as I thought." "They're hunting the bears?" Lily asked, her voice small and frightened. Connor glanced at Ethan, who gave a slight nod. No point hiding the truth from her. "Yes, they might be," Connor answered. "But that's why I have these cameras, to catch them in the act. I'll send this footage to the wildlife officers today." He continued clicking through files until suddenly he stopped, his expression changing. "Well, I'll be..." The timestamp showed this footage was from yesterday evening, just after sunset. In the green-tinged night vision, they could clearly see the mother bear and her cub making their way through the forest. The cub was limping but moving steadily alongside its mother. "They're okay," Lily exclaimed, her relief palpable. But Connor's focus was on something else. "Look there, in the background." Barely visible at the edge of the frame was a third figure. Another bear, larger than the mother. "Is that the father?" Lily asked. Connor shook his head. "Male bears don't typically stay with females and cubs. In fact, they can be a danger to the cubs." He squinted at the screen. This is unusual behavior. Could it be another female? Ethan suggested. Possible, Connor murmured. Let's keep watching. The next few videos showed the three bears moving together through the forest. The third bear maintained a consistent distance, close enough to be clearly traveling with them, but not so close as to appear threatening. I've never seen anything like this, Connor admitted. Bears aren't typically social outside of mating season or mothers with cubs. Maybe it's helping protect them from the poachers, Lily suggested earnestly. Connor smiled at her. That's a nice thought, Lily. Nature is full of surprises. He scrolled to the final video, recorded just before dawn that morning. The three bears were moving toward what appeared to be a rocky outcropping, half hidden by snow and evergreen branches. That looks like an entrance to a den, Connor observed. They're finding shelter. Smart. Lily clapped her hands. So they're safe now? Safer than they were out in the open, Connor confirmed. And I recognize that area. It's deep in the protected forest, away from common hiking trails. Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Despite the danger they'd faced, knowing the bears had found safety brought an unexpected sense of closure. I should contact the Wildlife Service, Connor said, ejecting the memory card. This footage of the poachers could help them catch these guys before they do any more damage. While Connor made his calls, Ethan checked his watch. It was already past noon. We should probably head back to our cabin soon, he told Lily. Our things are still there, and we need to check that everything's okay after the storm. Lily nodded, though he could see reluctance in her eyes. Can we come back and visit Mr. Adams before we go home? If he doesn't mind, sure, Ethan replied, touched by how quickly she'd formed a connection with the gruff old ranger. Connor finished his call and approached them. Wildlife officers are sending someone out tomorrow morning. They were very interested in the footage. He looked at Lily. They said to tell you thank you for helping spot the bear tracks. You've got a good eye, young lady. She beamed at the praise. Dad says I notice things other people miss. Mom was like that too. It's a valuable skill, Connor assured her. Might make a good ranger yourself someday. Ethan cleared his throat. Connor, we should probably get back to our cabin. Can't thank you enough for everything. No need for thanks, Connor waved him off. But I'm not letting you walk back through those woods. I'll drive you in my truck. It's safer, and your body needs rest after yesterday's hypothermia. 20 minutes later, they were bumping down the narrow forest road in Connor's ancient but sturdy pickup truck. Lily sat between them in the cab, still clutching one of Connor's wildlife books that he'd insisted she borrow. Dad, look, she suddenly exclaimed, pointing through the windshield. Up ahead, a figure was walking along the road. A woman in a heavy winter coat, a large backpack slung over her shoulders. She turned at the sound of the approaching truck, raising a hand in greeting. Connor slowed the vehicle. That's Dr. Hayes, he said, surprising Ethan. Wildlife veterinarian, works with the conservation department. He pulled alongside the woman and rolled down his window. Afternoon, Doc. Bit far from the usual trails, aren't you? Dr. Hayes, a woman perhaps in her late 30s with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, approached the truck. Connor, just the person I was hoping to run into. Her eyes shifted curiously to Ethan and Lily. Hello there. Savannah, this is Ethan Marshall and his daughter Lily. Connor introduced them. Folks, this is Dr. Savannah Hayes, the best wildlife vet in 3 states. Nice to meet you, Ethan said, noting the woman's tired eyes and the determination in her stance. What brings you out in this weather, Doc? Connor asked. Thought you'd be down at the research station. Dr. Hayes's expression grew serious. we've detected unusual movement patterns among the bear population. Several have abandoned their winter dens in the past 2 weeks. I'm trying to figure out why. Connor's eyebrows shot up. Well, you're not going to believe this, but we've got some information that might interest you. He briefly recounted yesterday's events and the footage from his trail cameras. As he spoke, Dr. Hayes's expression changed from professional interest to intense concentration. A mother and cub active in January, plus an unrelated adult bear traveling with them, that's highly unusual. She looked directly at Ethan. And you say the mother had the opportunity to attack, but chose not to? Ethan nodded. It was the strangest thing. She just looked at me, then turned away. I'd very much like to see this footage, Dr. Hayes said to Connor, and perhaps talk more about your encounter. She glanced at Ethan and Lily. If you don't mind, of course. We were just heading back to their cabin, Connor explained. Had a bit of an adventure yesterday. Dr. Hayes seemed to notice Ethan's pallor and exhausted demeanor for the first time. Are you all right? You look like you've had a rough time. Dad fell in the frozen lake trying to save the bear cub, Lily explained matter-of-factly. Then Mr. Adams pulled him out. Dr. Hayes's eyes widened. You need medical attention. Hypothermia is serious, even if you feel recovered. I'm fine, Ethan insisted. Just tired and sore. Dr. Hayes fixed him with a professional stare that brooked no argument. As a doctor, even if my usual patients have 4 legs, I'm telling you that you need to be checked over. Delayed symptoms of hypothermia can be dangerous. Connor nodded in agreement. The doc's right, Ethan. No arguing with medical professionals. I learned that the hard way. Can we still go back to our cabin? Lily asked anxiously. All my stuff is there. Dr. Hayes considered for a moment. Tell you what. We'll stop at your cabin to collect your things, then head to the research station. They have medical facilities there, and I can check Mr. Marshall over properly. She turned to Connor. And I can look at your footage there, too. Works for me, Connor agreed. Ethan wanted to protest, but found he lacked the energy. Plus, the concerned look Lily was giving him was enough to sway his decision. All right, he conceded, but just a quick check. They made room for Dr. Hayes in the truck, and Connor drove the short distance to Ethan and Lily's cabin. The small structure looked untouched by the storm, though snow had piled high against the front door. I'll help you gather your things, Dr. Hayes offered, climbing out of the truck. The sooner we get you to the station, the better. Inside, the cabin was cold but undamaged. While Lily collected her belongings from the small bedroom she'd been using, Ethan found himself sitting heavily on the couch, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. You really don't look well, Dr. Hayes observed, her professional demeanor softening with concern. How long were you in the water yesterday? Not long, Ethan replied. Maybe a couple of minutes. Connor pulled me out pretty quickly. She frowned. Even brief immersion in freezing water can cause significant trauma to the body. Your vital organs could have been affected. I just need some rest, Ethan insisted, though he had to admit he felt worse now than he had this morning. A dull ache had settled into his chest, and his breathing felt slightly labored. We're going to the research station, Dr. Hayes said firmly. No arguments. To Ethan's surprise, Lily appeared in the doorway, her backpack already packed. Dad, please listen to the doctor. You always told me doctors know best. Caught by his own words, Ethan managed a weak smile. Using my own logic against me, huh? That's playing dirty. Learned from the best, Lily replied with a small smile of her own. 20 minutes later, they were back in Connor's truck, headed deeper into the forest than Ethan had ever been. The road narrowed further, winding through dense stands of pine and spruce. Eventually, they emerged into a clearing where several low buildings stood, partially hidden by strategic landscaping that helped them blend into the surrounding forest. "Welcome to Pinewood Research Station," Dr. Hayes said as Connor parked near the main building. "It's not much to look at, but we do important work here." The station consisted of what appeared to be a converted ranger facility, a main building with a rustic lodge appearance, two smaller cabin-like structures, and a large barn-style building set somewhat apart from the others. "What kind of research do you do here?" Lily asked, her natural curiosity overcoming her worry for her father. "We study wildlife behavior, population health, and ways to protect endangered species," Dr. Hayes explained as they climbed out of the truck. "Right now, we're particularly focused on the local bear population. They've been showing some unusual behaviors over the past year." "Like not hibernating properly?" Connor asked, helping Ethan, who was finding it increasingly difficult to catch his breath. Dr. Hayes nodded, her expression troubled. "Among other things, let's get inside, and I'll explain more after I've examined Mr. Marshall." The interior of the main building was surprisingly modern compared to its rustic exterior. A large open area served as both reception and communal workspace, with several desks equipped with computers. Beyond this was a hallway leading to what appeared to be laboratories and other specialized rooms. A young man looked up from one of the computer stations as they entered. "Dr. Hayes, we weren't expecting you back so soon." His eyes widened as he took in the group. "And with company. Jacob, this is Connor Adams. You've met before. And Ethan and Lily Marshall." Dr. Hayes introduced them. "Mr. Marshall had an unfortunate encounter with our frozen lake yesterday and needs medical attention. Can you prep the exam room, please?" "Of course," Jacob replied, immediately standing. "And Dr. Bennett was looking for you. He said it's urgent, something about the tracking data." Dr. Hayes's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Tell him I'll be there shortly. Mr. Marshall is my priority right now." As Jacob hurried off, Dr. Hayes turned to Lily. "Your father will be fine, but I need to examine him. Would you like to wait here? Jacob can show you some of the wildlife photography we've collected." Lily looked uncertainly at her father. "Can't I stay with Dad?" Ethan, despite feeling increasingly unwell, managed to give her a reassuring smile. "I'll be fine, Lil. This won't take long, and I bet they have some amazing animal pictures to show you." Connor placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "I'll stay with you, kiddo. Maybe we can show them our bear footage while the doc checks your dad." After a moment's hesitation, Lily nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but you promise you'll be all right, Dad?" "Promise," Ethan replied, hoping he sounded more confident than he felt. Dr. Hayes led Ethan down the hallway to a small but well-equipped examination room. "Please sit on the table," she instructed, washing her hands at a sink before pulling on latex gloves. "And remove your shirt if you can." Ethan complied, wincing at the effort it took. Now that he was here, he had to admit that seeking medical attention had probably been wise. The ache in his chest had intensified, and he felt unusually cold despite the building's warm temperature. Dr. Hayes noticed his discomfort immediately. "How long have you been experiencing chest pain?" she asked, her tone shifting from friendly to professionally clinical. "Just since we got to the cabin," Ethan admitted. "I thought it was just muscle strain from yesterday." She placed a stethoscope against his chest, listening intently. Her expression gave nothing away, but she spent longer than Ethan expected, moving the instrument to different positions and asking him to breathe deeply. "Your lungs don't sound clear," she finally said, draping the stethoscope around her neck. "And your heart rate is elevated." I'm concerned you may have developed pneumonia, or possibly a condition called secondary drowning." "Secondary drowning?" Ethan repeated, alarm creeping into his voice. "It's when water irritates the lung lining, causing inflammation and fluid buildup," she explained. "It can develop hours after a near-drowning experience." She took his blood pressure, frowning at the reading. "Your blood pressure is lower than I'd like to see. How's your temperature regulation? Any extreme chills or sweating?" As if in answer, Ethan suddenly found himself shivering uncontrollably, his teeth chattering. "Guess that answers that question," he managed. Dr. Hayes's expression grew more concerned. "I want to get a chest X-ray and start you on antibiotics immediately. We have basic medical equipment here for emergencies, enough to determine if you need to be transferred to the hospital in town." The seriousness in her voice finally broke through Ethan's stubborn denial. "Is it that bad?" he asked quietly. "It could become that bad if left untreated," she replied honestly. "You've suffered significant physical trauma, Mr. Marshall. Your body temperature dropped dangerously low, you aspirated cold water, and then you didn't receive proper medical treatment. I'm frankly not surprised you're showing these symptoms." Ethan thought of Lily waiting outside, of the promise he'd made her that he wouldn't leave her alone in the world. "Do whatever you need to do, Doctor. I have a daughter who needs me." Dr. Hayes's expression softened. "She seems like a remarkable young lady, very brave and observant." "She is," Ethan agreed, pride momentarily overshadowing his discomfort. "She's been through a lot this past year. Her mother, my wife, passed away from cancer." Understanding dawned in Dr. Hayes's eyes. "I'm very sorry for your loss, and that explains why she's so concerned about you." She began preparing an IV line. "I'm going to start you on some intravenous antibiotics and fluids. Then we'll do that X-ray." As she worked, Ethan found himself studying her. Despite her focus on him as a patient, he could tell her mind was partially elsewhere, likely on whatever urgent matter her colleague had mentioned. "You said the bears have been showing unusual behavior," he said, partly to distract himself from the needle she was expertly inserting into his arm. "Is that related to the poachers Connor mentioned?" Dr. Hayes secured the IV before answering. "Possibly, but we think there's more to it. Over the past 8 months, we've documented radical changes in migration patterns, denning behaviors, and even social structures." She hung a bag of clear fluid on a stand beside the examination table. "Bears that should be hibernating are active. Territories are shifting. And perhaps most unusually, we're seeing evidence of cooperative behaviors between bears that aren't related, like the adult bear traveling with the mother and cub you encountered." "That's not normal?" Ethan asked, fascinated despite his circumstances. "It's practically unheard of," Dr. Hayes confirmed. "Black bears are typically solitary animals, except for mothers with cubs. Adults generally avoid each other outside of mating season." She checked his temperature with an ear thermometer, her frown deepening at the reading. 101.2, you've got a fever. Your body is fighting an infection." Before Ethan could respond, there was a knock at the door, and Jacob poked his head in. "Sorry to interrupt, Doctor." "Hayes, but Dr. Bennett is quite insistent about seeing you immediately. He says it concerns the anomaly you've been tracking." Dr. Hayes hesitated, clearly torn between her medical duty to Ethan and whatever research matter required her attention. "Go ahead," Ethan urged her. "I'm not going anywhere with this IV, and I'm already feeling a bit better." It wasn't entirely true. The chest pain remained, and the fever made him feel alternately hot and cold, but he could see the conflict in her expression. "I'll be right back," she promised. The antibiotics need about 20 minutes to infuse anyway. Try to rest. After she left, Ethan leaned back against the raised examination table, closing his eyes. Despite his discomfort, his mind kept returning to the bears. The mother's intelligent gaze, the injured cub, the mysterious third bear accompanying them. Something about their plight resonated deeply with him. Perhaps because he saw parallels to his own small family. Wounded, vulnerable, yet persevering. He must have dozed off because the next thing he knew, raised voices from the hallway jolted him awake. Irresponsible to keep this from the authorities. A male voice, tense with anger. We don't have enough data yet to make that kind of claim. Dr. Hayes's voice, equally firm. And the last thing we need is a panic based on inconclusive evidence. 3 dens abandoned in a week, multiple bears exhibiting unprecedented social behaviors, and now this anomaly showing up again. What more evidence do you need, Savannah? Ethan couldn't hear Dr. Hayes's response as the voices moved further down the hallway. He sat up, curious despite himself. What anomaly were they discussing? And how did it relate to the strange behavior of the bears he'd encountered? The door opened and Dr. Hayes returned, looking slightly flustered but quickly adopting a professional demeanor. Sorry about that, she said. Research disagreements. How are you feeling? About the same, Ethan admitted. What kind of anomaly were you and your colleague discussing? Does it have something to do with the bears? Dr. Hayes gave him a sharp look. You heard that? Hard not to, Ethan replied. Your colleague has a carrying voice. She seemed to debate internally before responding. It's probably nothing. Just an unusual reading on some of our tracking equipment. Her tone made it clear she didn't want to elaborate. Ethan decided not to push. How's Lily doing? Dr. Hayes's expression softened. She's fine. Actually, she's become quite the center of attention out there. She's been telling everyone about your bear encounter, and Connor's showing them the footage from his trail cameras. Your daughter has quite a way with words for someone so young. Pride warmed Ethan's chest. She gets that from her mother. Rebecca was a writer. Children's books, actually. Many of them about animals. That explains Lily's knowledge, Dr. Hayes commented, checking the IV bag. She corrected one of our junior researchers about bear hibernation facts. Despite everything, Ethan laughed. That sounds like her. She absorbs information like a sponge. Dr. Hayes disconnected the empty IV bag. The antibiotics are in your system now. Let's get that X-ray and then we can determine next steps. The X-ray equipment was in an adjacent room, more sophisticated than Ethan would have expected for a remote research station. We use this primarily for wildlife research, Dr. Hayes explained as she positioned him in front of the machine. But it works just as well for humans. After taking several images, she led Ethan back to the examination room to wait while she reviewed them. Left alone again, he found his thoughts drifting to the conversation he'd overheard. Whatever anomaly they were tracking, it clearly had the research team concerned, and possibly divided on how to proceed. When Dr. Hayes returned, her expression was more relaxed. Good news, your lungs show some infiltrates, likely from inhaling lake water, but no significant pneumonia yet. The antibiotics should prevent it from developing further. Relief washed over Ethan. So, no hospital? Not if you follow my instructions, she replied firmly. Rest, continue the antibiotics I'll prescribe, and follow up with your primary doctor when you return home. She paused. When were you planning to leave the area? We're supposed to head back to the city tomorrow, Ethan said. We both have to get back to work and school on Monday. Dr. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. I'd feel better if you stayed somewhere close tonight, where you could get medical attention quickly if needed. The first 24 hours after symptoms appear are the most critical. We could stay at my cabin, Connor suggested from the doorway, where he'd appeared with Lily beside him. It's closer to civilization than Ethan's rental, and I've got a satellite phone for emergencies. Lily rushed to her father's side. Are you okay, Dad? Dr. Bennett showed me x-rays of bear lungs, and they look really different from human lungs. I'm going to be fine, Ethan assured her, embracing her with his free arm. Just need some medicine and rest. Dr. Hayes smiled at the pair of them. Your father is going to be okay, Lily. He's very strong, and we caught this early. A commotion in the main area of the building interrupted their conversation. Hurried footsteps and urgent voices. Dr. Hayes frowned, moving to the door just as Jacob appeared, his expression anxious. Dr. Hayes, you need to come quickly. The tracking system. It's showing movement near the North Ridge. Multiple signatures, all converging on the same location. Dr. Hayes's professional composure slipped for a moment, revealing genuine alarm. How many? 7 distinct signatures, all within a 2-mile radius, Jacob replied. And ... And what? She pressed when he hesitated. The anomaly is there too, stronger than we've ever recorded it. Without another word, Dr. Hayes hurried from the room, leaving Ethan, Lily, and Connor exchanging confused glances. What's the anomaly they keep talking about? Lily asked, looking to Connor. The old ranger shook his head. No idea, kiddo, but something's got them spooked, that's for sure. Ethan felt a strange prickling sensation at the back of his neck. The same feeling he'd experienced in combat when something wasn't right. Connor, did you show them the footage of the 3 bears heading toward that rocky outcropping? Yeah, why? Where was that located? In relation to here? Connor considered for a moment. North Ridge area, I think. Maybe 3 miles from this facility as the crow flies. Ethan's unease deepened. Whatever anomaly the research team was tracking, it was in the same area as the bears they'd encountered. And now other bears were converging there too. It couldn't be coincidence. Dr. Hayes returned several minutes later, her face flushed with urgency. Mr. Marshall, I'm going to have to cut our medical consultation short. An urgent situation has developed that requires our immediate attention. The bears? Ethan guessed. She nodded, not bothering to hide her concern anymore. Yes, we're seeing unprecedented movement patterns. Multiple bears, all heading to the same location. It's something we've never documented before. The same location where our mother bear and cub were heading, Connor asked. Exactly there, Dr. Hayes confirmed. We're organizing a research team to investigate immediately. Lily tugged at Ethan's hand. Dad, do you think something's wrong with the bears? Is that why they're not hibernating? Before Ethan could answer, Dr. Bennett appeared in the doorway. He was a tall man with a trim gray beard and intense eyes currently narrowed with impatience. Savannah, the team is ready. We need to move now if we want to observe this phenomenon. His gaze swept over the others in the room, lingering on Ethan with obvious curiosity. Is this the man who encountered the mother and cub? Dr. Hayes nodded. Dr. Michael Bennett, this is Ethan Marshall, his daughter Lily, and Connor Adams, who I believe you've met before. The retired ranger, yes, Dr. Bennett acknowledged with a quick nod. Mr. Marshall, I understand you had a rather unusual encounter with one of our study subjects. The bear chose not to attack despite having every natural reason to do so. That's right, Ethan confirmed, unsettled by the man's intense scrutiny. She just looked at me, then walked away with her cub. Dr. Bennett exchanged a significant glance with Dr. Hayes. Fascinating. And you said there was a third bear accompanying them. According to the trail camera footage, Connor confirmed. Larger than the mother, but keeping its distance. Dr. Bennett's eyes lit with excitement. This confirms our hypothesis, Savannah. It's not random behavior. They're organizing. Organizing? Ethan repeated, confused. What do you mean, organizing? Dr. Hayes shot her colleague a warning look. Dr. Bennett is referring to a behavioral hypothesis we've been investigating. Black bears are typically solitary animals, but we've been documenting unusual social patterns over the past several months. But why would they suddenly change behavior that's been instinctual for thousands of years? Ethan asked. Dr. Bennett stepped further into the room, his scientific enthusiasm overriding Dr. Hayes's caution. That's the fascinating question, isn't it? We believe they're responding to a threat, adapting their behavior for survival. The poachers? Connor guessed. Possibly a contributing factor, Doctor. Bennett acknowledged. But we suspect there's something more significant at play. He turned to Dr. Hayes. Savannah, these people have directly encountered what we've only been observing from a distance. Their insights could be valuable. Dr. Hayes hesitated, clearly torn between professional discretion and the potential benefits of including them. They're civilians, Michael. They've already been through enough danger. What's going on with the bears? Lily asked, her young voice cutting through the tension. Are they in trouble? Both scientists looked at the child, their expressions softening. It was Dr. Hayes who finally relented. Yes, Lily, we think they might be, and we're trying to help them. She turned to Ethan. Mr. Marshall, I need to join the research team investigating this unusual bear activity. You should rest here until we return, then we'll discuss getting you and Lily safely back to Connor's cabin. I want to come too, Lily declared immediately. I want to help the bears. Absolutely not, Dr. Hayes replied firmly. It's potentially dangerous and… Actually, Doctor, Bennett interrupted. Having Mr. Marshall with us could be invaluable. The mother bear recognized him somehow. That connection might be important. He has a fever and chest inflammation, Dr. Hayes objected. He needs rest, not a trek through frozen woods. Ethan, who had been following the exchange with growing interest, found himself caught between medical wisdom and an inexplicable sense that he should be part of this. What exactly are you expecting to find out there? Dr. Bennett and Dr. Hayes exchanged another look, seemingly engaged in silent communication. Finally, Dr. Hayes sighed. We've been tracking an unusual electromagnetic signature in these woods for the past 6 months, she explained reluctantly. It first appeared shortly after a meteor shower last summer. Initially it was weak and intermittent, but it's been growing stronger and more consistent, and the bears, particularly the more intelligent, older females, seem to be responding to it. Responding how? Connor asked, his weathered face creased with concern. Moving toward it, Dr. Bennett replied, changing their denning locations to be closer to it, and most remarkably, forming what appeared to be rudimentary social groups centered around experienced matriarchs. Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with his fever. You're saying something is influencing the bears? Changing their behavior? We don't know exactly what's happening, Dr. Hayes admitted. But whatever it is, it's escalating. The readings we're getting now are 10 times stronger than anything we've recorded previously, and the bears, 7 distinct individuals at last count, are all converging on the source. Lily, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. Maybe they're trying to protect it, like maybe it's something important to them. Dr. Bennett looked at her with genuine interest. That's actually not far from one of our hypotheses, young lady. Very insightful. Ethan glanced between his daughter and the scientists, then at Connor, who gave a slight shrug as if to say the decision was his. He thought about the mother bear's intelligent gaze, about the way she had looked at him on the ice. Not with animal fury, but with something that had seemed almost like recognition. "If I come with you," he said slowly, "Lily stays here where it's safe." "Dad, no!" Lily protested immediately. "I want to come too." "It's not open for discussion, Lil," Ethan said gently but firmly. "If these doctors think I can help somehow, I will. But only if you stay here where it's safe." Dr. Hayes still looked uncertain. "Mr. Marshall, I cannot in good conscience advise you to join this expedition in your condition. The cold alone could worsen your symptoms." "I'll be careful," Ethan promised. "And to be honest, I think I need to see this through. For both Lily and myself." After further discussion and Dr. Hayes's reluctant agreement, a plan was formed. Ethan would accompany the research team, adequately bundled against the cold and with emergency medical supplies. Lily would remain at the research station with Connor and Jacob, who promised to show her their wildlife databases and maybe even let her help analyze some of the trail camera footage. Before departing, Dr. Hayes gave Ethan another dose of antibiotics and a thorough lecture on recognizing signs of worsening respiratory distress. She packed a small emergency medical kit for him to carry, including an inhaler to help if his breathing became labored. "I still think this is a terrible idea," she told him as she helped him into a heavy parka, borrowed from the station's supplies. "But I understand why you feel you need to do it." Ethan nodded gratefully. "Thank you, and thank you for understanding." Saying goodbye to Lily was harder. She clung to him tightly, her earlier excitement about wildlife exploration temporarily forgotten in the face of being separated from her father again. "You promised not to leave me," she whispered against his chest. Ethan knelt down, ignoring the protest from his sore muscles. "I'm not leaving you, Lil. I'm just going to help these scientists understand what's happening with the bears. Connor will be right here with you, and I'll be back before you know it." "You promise?" she asked, her blue eyes serious. "Cross my heart," he replied, making the gesture that had been their solemn pact since she was tiny. "And when I get back, we'll have an amazing story to tell when we go home." This seemed to reassure her somewhat. She stepped back, squaring her small shoulders. "Okay, but be careful, and don't fall in any more lakes." Ethan laughed, despite the ache in his chest. "Deal." The research team consisted of Dr. Hayes, Dr. Bennett, and 2 graduate students introduced as Avery and Logan. They traveled in a rugged all-terrain vehicle as far as the forest road allowed, then continued on foot, following a narrow trail through the dense woods. Ethan could feel Dr. Hayes watching him closely for any signs of distress, but he was determined not to show weakness, despite the occasional sharp pain in his chest when he breathed deeply. They hiked for about 40 minutes, the terrain gradually becoming more rugged as they approached the ridgeline. Dr. Bennett led the way, consulting frequently with a sophisticated handheld device that Ethan assumed was tracking the mysterious electromagnetic signature. "We're getting close," Dr. Bennett announced, his breath clouding in the cold air. "The signal strength is increasing exponentially." "Any bear activity?" Dr. Hayes asked, scanning the surrounding forest. Logan, a lanky young man with a shock of red hair visible beneath his winter hat, checked another device. "Multiple signatures within half a mile. They're converging ahead of us, just as we predicted." Ethan felt a prickling sensation at the back of his neck, the familiar warning sign from his military days that they were being watched. He scanned the trees but saw nothing unusual in the winter landscape. "Does anyone else feel like we're being observed?" he asked quietly. The research team exchanged glances. Bears have excellent senses, Dr. Hayes explained. They likely know we're here, even if we can't see them. How dangerous is this? Ethan asked bluntly. Multiple bears in one location sounds like a recipe for aggression. Typically, yes, Dr. Bennett agreed. But these bears aren't displaying normal territorial behaviors. They're cooperating, communicating somehow. It's unprecedented. His eyes gleamed with scientific excitement behind his glasses. They continued forward more cautiously now, the two graduate students documenting everything with small cameras attached to their parkas. The forest had grown eerily quiet. No birds called, no small creatures rustled in the underbrush. The silence itself seemed watchful, expectant. The signals coming from just beyond that rocky outcrop, Dr. Bennett said, pointing ahead to where a jumble of large boulders created a natural formation on the ridgeline. And there's significant bear activity in the same location. We should approach slowly, Doctor, Hayes cautioned. No sudden movements, no loud noises. Remember, we're here to observe only. They moved forward as a tight group, each step deliberate and cautious. As they rounded the edge of the boulder formation, the forest opened into a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines. In the center of the clearing was a sight that stopped them all in their tracks. Bears, 7 of them, as the sensors had indicated, had gathered in a rough circle around what appeared to be a small depression in the earth. Most were full-grown adults, with 2 younger ones that might have been adolescents. Among them, Ethan immediately recognized the mother and cub from yesterday, along with a third bear that had been traveling with them. But it wasn't just the unusual gathering of normally solitary animals that rendered the research team speechless. It was what the bears were surrounding. In the shallow depression, partially embedded in the frozen ground, was an object unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Roughly the size of a basketball, it had an irregular, crystalline structure that seemed to shift between deep blue and violet hues even as they watched. Its surface appeared both solid and somehow fluid, catching the weak winter sunlight and refracting it in impossible patterns. My God, Dr. Bennett breathed, his scientific detachment momentarily abandoned. It's not just a signature. It's an actual physical artifact. Dr. Hayes had gone very still beside Ethan. We need to document this immediately, she whispered, her eyes never leaving the gathered bears. Avery, start recording. Logan, get the spectral readings if you can without disturbing them. The graduate students moved with painstaking slowness, raising their equipment. Ethan, however, found himself unable to focus on the strange object. His attention was fixed on the mother bear he'd encountered the day before. Even from this distance, he could see her watching them. Watching him specifically, with that same unsettling intelligence he'd witnessed on the ice. She recognizes me, he murmured, mostly to himself. Dr. Hayes glanced at him sharply. What makes you say that? Look at her eyes, Ethan replied softly. She's focused directly on me, not on all of us, on me specifically. As if to confirm his observation, the mother bear suddenly rose to her full height, her massive form imposing against the winter backdrop. The other bears remained in position, seemingly unfazed by her movement. With deliberate steps, she began to approach the human observers. Nobody move, Dr. Hayes instructed, tension evident in her voice despite her attempt at calm. No sudden gestures, no running. Ethan stood frozen in place, heart pounding, as the bear drew closer. His mind flashed to Lily waiting back at the research station, to his promise that he would return safely. Had he made a terrible mistake coming here? The bear stopped about 15 feet away, still a dangerous distance but not immediately threatening. She lowered herself to all fours, then did something that sent a collective gasp through the research team. She inclined her head, a gesture that appeared for all the world like a bow or a nod of acknowledgement. "Is she greeting you?" Dr. Bennett whispered incredulously. Before Ethan could respond, the bear turned and looked meaningfully back at the object in the depression, then at Ethan again. The message seemed unmistakable. She wanted him to approach. "She wants me to come closer," Ethan said, the realization hitting him with bizarre certainty. "That's impossible," Dr. Hayes objected immediately. "Bears don't communicate like that with humans." "These bears aren't behaving like normal bears," Dr. Bennett countered, excitement breaking through his caution. "Mr. Marshall, what exactly do you feel she's trying to convey?" Ethan struggled to articulate the inexplicable certainty he felt. "It's like she's inviting me, showing me something." He took a hesitant step forward. Dr. Hayes grabbed his arm. "Ethan, don't. It's too dangerous." The bear made a soft huffing sound, neither aggressive nor fearful. She took a few steps back toward the gathered bears and the strange object, then paused, looking at Ethan again. "I think I need to follow her," Ethan said, gently removing Dr. Hayes's hand from his arm. "I can't explain it, but I feel like this is why I'm here." "This is unprecedented," Dr. Bennett murmured, adjusting his glasses in agitation. "Completely outside the scope of documented bear behavior." "Which is precisely why he shouldn't approach a wild animal that could kill him with one swipe," Dr. Hayes argued, her professional concern evident, but Ethan was already moving forward, drawn by something he couldn't articulate. He maintained a slow, steady pace, hands visible at his sides, eyes locked with the mother bear's. With each step he expected the spell to break, for the bear to suddenly remember she was a wild creature and he was a human intruder. But she remained calm, watching his approach with what could only be described as patient expectation. When he was within 10 feet of the gathered bears, the mother stepped aside, creating a path to the strange object in the depression. The other bears shifted slightly but made no aggressive moves. It was as if they had been waiting for him. Ethan approached the edge of the shallow pit where the object rested. Up close, its otherworldly nature was even more apparent. The surface seemed to ripple with energy, colors shifting and swirling in patterns that made his eyes hurt if he focused too long on any one spot. An odd humming vibration emanated from it, felt more than heard. "What is it?" he called back softly to the research team, who remained frozen in place at the edge of the clearing. "We don't know, Doctor," Bennett replied, his voice hushed with awe, "but its composition doesn't match any known terrestrial material." The implication hung in the air, unspoken but impossible to ignore. The mother bear made another soft sound, drawing Ethan's attention. She was looking at him expectantly, then at the object, then back at him. Again, the message seemed clear. She wanted him to do something. "I think she wants me to touch it," Ethan said, disbelief coloring his voice even as the certainty grew within him. "Mr. Marshall, I strongly advise against direct contact with an unknown substance," Dr. Hayes called, professional caution overriding her amazement at the scene unfolding before them. But Ethan was barely listening. The object seemed to be calling to him now, the strange humming vibration finding resonance somewhere deep in his chest. Slowly, almost involuntarily, he extended his hand toward its shimmering surface. "Ethan, don't." Dr. Hayes's warning came too late. His fingers made contact with the crystalline structure, and the world exploded into light and sensation. A surge of energy traveled up his arm and spread throughout his body, not painful, but intensely powerful. Images flashed through his mind too quickly to comprehend. Forests, mountains, oceans, creatures he recognized and others he didn't. And through it all, a sense of desperate urgency, of warning, of time running out. The connection lasted only seconds before Ethan stumbled backward, gasping. The bears remained calm, watching him with collective intensity that defied explanation. He turned to look at the research team who were staring at him in shocked silence. "Did you see that?" he asked, his voice shaking. "See what?" Dr. Bennett called back. "The object flared brighter when you touched it, but nothing else was visible from here." Ethan looked down at his hand, which appeared perfectly normal despite the incredible sensation that had coursed through it moments before. "I I don't know how to describe it, images, feelings, like it was trying to communicate something." At that moment, the bears began to move. As one coordinated group, they shifted position, forming a more protective circle around the object. The mother bear gave Ethan one last significant look before turning her attention back to the strange artifact. A dismissal, Ethan realized. They had shown him what they wanted him to see, and now they expected him to leave. Backing away slowly, he rejoined the research team who immediately surrounded him with questions. "What happened? What did you feel? How did you know to touch it?" Ethan raised his hands to quiet them, his mind still reeling from the experience. "I don't fully understand it myself," he admitted. "But I think they're protecting it. And I think it's trying to communicate something." Dr. Bennett's scientific skepticism warred visibly with what he had just witnessed. Communication implies intelligence. Are you suggesting this object is sentient in some way? "I don't know," Ethan replied honestly. "But I know what I felt. There was intention behind what it showed me. Purpose." "What exactly did you see?" Dr. Hayes pressed, her medical concern for him temporarily overshadowed by scientific curiosity. Ethan struggled to articulate the rapid-fire images and sensations. Nature, animals, ecosystems, and a sense of warning, like an alarm bell ringing. He looked back at the bears, still maintaining their protective circle. "I think they can sense it too. That's why they're gathered here, why they're changing their behavior. They're responding to whatever message this thing is sending." "A warning about what?" Logan asked, his young face serious beneath his red hair. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But it felt urgent, critical." Dr. Bennett was furiously taking notes on a small pad. "Unprecedented, completely unprecedented. If what you're describing is accurate, we're witnessing something that could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies communication, possibly even extraterrestrial contact." "Michael, let's not jump to conclusions," Dr. Hayes cautioned, though her own expression betrayed similar excitement. "We need more data, more observations, and Mr. Marshall needs medical attention. That interaction could have affected him in ways we don't understand." Ethan wanted to protest that he felt fine. Better than fine, actually, with the chest pain and fever seemingly diminished. But a sudden commotion from the bears drew everyone's attention. The animals had become agitated, looking toward the far side of the clearing. One of the younger bears stood on its hind legs, sniffing the air anxiously. The mother bear that had approached Ethan made a low, warning sound. "Something's wrong," Ethan said, the hairs on the back of his neck rising again. "They sense a threat." As if confirming his words, the distinctive crack of a rifle shot echoed through the forest, followed by the zip of a bullet striking a tree near the gathered bears. The animals scattered instantly, some heading for the dense forest while others, including the mother and cub, positioned themselves protectively around the strange object. "Poachers!" Dr. Hayes exclaimed. immediately pulling Ethan down behind the cover of a fallen log. The rest of the research team quickly followed suit. Another shot rang out, this one coming closer to their position. Ethan's military training kicked in, his body responding automatically to the threat. "Stay down," he instructed the scientists. "How many of them are there, do you know?" "The trail cameras showed 2 men," Dr. Hayes replied, her voice tight with tension. "But there could be more." A third shot, and one of the bears, a smaller adult that had been helping guard the object, let out a pained roar. The animal staggered but remained upright, blood visible on its dark fur. "They're shooting the bears," Aubrey gasped, horrified. "They're after the artifact," Dr. Bennett realized aloud. "They must have detected its energy signature somehow." Ethan's mind raced. Even with his military background, they were unarmed civilians facing armed poachers. The smart move would be to retreat, to get the research team to safety and call for help. But that would mean abandoning the bears, and whatever strange object they were protecting, to the poachers. The decision was made for him when 2 men in camouflage gear emerged from the tree line on the far side of the clearing, rifles raised. They weren't the rough hunters Ethan had expected, but methodical, professional-looking individuals moving with tactical precision. "Those aren't ordinary poachers," he whispered to Dr. Hayes. "They're too well equipped, too coordinated." One of the men spoke into what appeared to be a communication device on his vest. "Area secured. Target confirmed. Local wildlife is interfering. Request permission to use more aggressive methods." "We need to get out of here," Dr. Hayes urged, tugging at Ethan's sleeve. "Those men are dangerous." But Ethan found himself unable to move, his attention fixed on the mother bear. Despite the gunfire, she remained at her post, protecting the artifact. Her cub huddled beside her, visibly frightened but staying put. The injured bear continued to stand its ground as well, blood now streaming down its flank. Something inside Ethan rebelled at the idea of leaving them to face these armed men alone. These bears had shown intelligence, coordination, purpose. They had chosen to reveal the artifact to him specifically. He couldn't abandon them now. "You 4 head back to the vehicle," he told the research team. "I'm going to create a diversion, draw their attention away from the bears and that object." "That's insane," Dr. Hayes objected immediately. "You're injured, unarmed, and outnumbered. They will shoot you without hesitation." "I've faced worse odds," Ethan replied grimly, thinking of his combat deployments. "And I can't just leave?" Dr. Bennett, surprisingly, nodded in understanding. "Whatever that object is, it's important enough for these bears to risk their lives protecting it. It must not fall into the wrong hands." "Exactly," Ethan agreed. "Now go. Get back up. I'll buy you time." Dr. Hayes clearly wanted to argue further, but the sound of the armed men advancing across the clearing made the urgency of the situation clear. "We'll come back with help," she promised. "Don't try to be a hero, Ethan. Just stay alive." With reluctance, the research team began to carefully retreat through the underbrush, heading back toward the trail they'd followed in. Ethan watched until they were out of sight, then turned his attention back to the clearing, where the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The armed men were approaching the bears guarding the artifact, weapons raised. The injured bear was weakening, its protective stance faltering. The mother bear roared a warning, positioning herself more firmly in front of her cub. Ethan needed a diversion, something to draw the men's attention away from the bears long enough for the research team to get safely away, and possibly for the bears to retreat with the artifact. Looking around desperately, he spotted a large, fallen branch nearby, half buried in snow. With careful movements, he extracted it and tested its weight. Not ideal, but it would have to do. Taking a deep breath, he rose slightly from his hiding place and hurled the branch as hard as he could toward the opposite side of the clearing. The branch crashed through the underbrush with a satisfying amount of noise. Both armed men swiveled immediately toward the sound, their rifles raised. "Movement at 2 o'clock, one of them called sharply. "Possible hostile." Ethan used their momentary distraction to move to a new position, circling behind a large pine tree. His plan was simple, but desperate. Keep moving, keep making noise, keep the men focused on him instead of the bears and the artifact. He grabbed a rock and threw it in another direction, creating another distraction. The men were now fully alert, scanning the forest edge with professional vigilance. "We have multiple contacts," one reported into his communication device, requesting backup immediately. Backup. That was bad news. Ethan needed to act quickly. With a silent apology to Dr. Hayes for ignoring her medical advice, he burst from his cover and sprinted across the edge of the clearing, making himself visible just long enough to draw their attention before disappearing into the dense trees again. "Contact!" one of the men shouted. "Male subject, moving west." Gunfire erupted, bullets splintering tree bark around Ethan as he ducked and wove through the forest. The pain in his chest flared with exertion, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He risked a glance back toward the clearing and saw with satisfaction that both men were now pursuing him, leaving the bears and the artifact temporarily unguarded. The mother bear seemed to recognize the opportunity. With surprising speed for her size, she began herding the other bears, including the injured one, toward the artifact. Working together, they appeared to be attempting to move it, rolling it from its depression in the earth. Ethan allowed himself a moment of hope. Maybe his diversion was working. Then a bullet whizzed past his ear, so close he could feel the displacement of air. These men were good shots, and he was running out of forest to hide in. Ahead, the trees thinned, leading to a steep, rocky slope. He was being driven into a trap, Ethan realized. With the slope ahead and armed pursuers behind, his options were dwindling rapidly. His breath came in painful gasps now, the exertion aggravating his weakened lungs. Making a split-second decision, Ethan veered sharply left, heading toward a densely wooded area that might provide better cover. But as he rounded a large boulder, he found himself face to face with a third armed man. Backup had arrived sooner than expected. "Freeze," the man commanded, his rifle aimed squarely at Ethan's chest. "Hands where I can see them." Ethan slowly raised his hands, mind racing. He was caught, but maybe he'd bought enough time for the bears to escape with the artifact. Maybe the research team had reached their vehicle and called for help. Maybe... A deafening roar shattered his thoughts. From behind the armed man, a massive shape launched itself forward, the mother bear, moving with shocking speed and purpose. The man barely had time to turn before she was upon him, her enormous weight knocking him to the ground, his rifle discharging harmlessly into the air. Ethan stood frozen in disbelief. The bear had abandoned the artifact and her cub to come to his aid. It defied every natural law, every understanding of animal behavior. The man screamed in terror, but the bear didn't maul him as nature would dictate. Instead, she pinned him briefly with her massive paws, roared once more directly into his face, then released him. The man scrambled away on all fours, leaving his rifle behind in his panic. The bear turned to Ethan, her intelligent eyes meeting his in what could only be described as mutual recognition. There was a moment of perfect understanding between them, an acknowledgement of the connection they now shared, though neither could explain it. Then shouts and gunfire from the clearing broke the spell. The bear's head swiveled toward the sound, her posture instantly alert. Without hesitation, she turned and raced back toward the clearing, toward her cub and the artifact they were protecting. Ethan, acting on pure instinct, grabbed the abandoned rifle and followed. What he saw upon re-entering the clearing stopped him cold. The two original armed men had been joined by 3 more, all focusing their attention on the bears still clustered around the artifact. The wounded bear had collapsed, while the others, including the cub, were trying desperately to move the strange object into the shelter of the forest. The mother bear charged into the clearing with a ferocity that momentarily scattered the armed men. She rejoined her cub, positioning herself protectively between the humans and the vulnerable youngster. Ethan raised the rifle, thankful for his military training. "Stop!" he shouted. "Back away now!" The armed men turned in surprise, clearly not expecting resistance. For a brief moment it seemed his bluff might work. They hesitated, assessing this new threat. Then the leader, identifiable by the additional equipment on his tactical vest, laughed coldly. "1 man with 1 rifle against 5 of us? Poor odds, friend." "Better than you think," came a gruff voice from the opposite side of the clearing. Connor Adams stood there, his own hunting rifle raised and steady. "I may be retired, but I can still hit what I aim at." The armed men shifted nervously, now caught between 2 armed opponents. But their leader remained coolly confident. "Stand down, gentlemen. This doesn't concern you. We're here for the object only." "That object isn't yours to take," another voice declared firmly. Dr. Hayes emerged from the trees, followed by Dr. Bennett and the 2 graduate students. "It's on protected land within a designated research area. You're trespassing and poaching, both federal offenses." The leader's expression hardened. "We have authorization to retrieve this artifact. Step aside or things will get unpleasant." "Authorization from whom?" Connor demanded. "I know every legitimate agency that operates in these woods, and none of them would sanction shooting endangered wildlife." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring, neither side willing to back down. The bears remained clustered around the artifact, the mother still guarding her cub. The injured bear lay still, its breathing labored but persistent. Ethan's mind raced. Despite Connor's assistance, they were still outnumbered and outgunned. And the longer this confrontation lasted, the more danger the bears were in. Something had to give. As if answering his unspoken thought, the strange artifact suddenly pulsed with brilliant light, bathing the clearing in an unearthly blue glow. The vibration Ethan had felt earlier intensified, becoming audible to everyone. A low, resonant hum that seemed to penetrate to the bone. The armed men faltered, momentarily distracted by the unprecedented display. The leader recovered first, barking orders. "Secure the artifact immediately. Use the containment protocols." 2 of his men rushed forward, pulling specialized equipment from their packs. But before they could reach the artifact, the most extraordinary thing yet occurred. The mother bear placed her massive paw directly on the glowing object. The blue light surged, enveloping her completely before spreading to encompass the other bears, including the injured one, whose wound seemed to close before their astonished eyes. The light continued to expand, reaching Ethan, Connor, and the research team, who stood transfixed by the spectacle.